Hello everyone. Thank you for having me. I was here last year in Buenos Aires for Mediamorfosis, and I gave a speech on virtual reality and all its impacts on the humankind and all the applications for good, so education, journalism, etc. But this presentation ended up being a little bit scary for the audience. Maybe Damien remembers it because I was talking about manipulation, and that was one of the most concerning subjects for the audience. So this year I decided to actually give a speech on reality, because in virtual reality we have virtual and reality, and I would like to speak to you about the secrets of the human recipe, how we see reality. And for that, of course, I had to ask myself the first question: what is reality? So have you ever asked yourself what is reality? If I give you 5 seconds, just very rapidly, who in this room thinks they have a good definition for reality? Hey, not a lot of people. I think it's 0. Okay, who thinks in this room that we have access to the same reality? No one as well. Interesting. Okay, so in my investigation of understanding better reality, I've done that everyone would have done. It's going to see what smarter people than me thinks about reality. And I came up with those 3 definitions in Oxford Dictionary. So the first one was the state of things. The state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to an idealistic or notional idea of them. The second one was a thing that is actually experienced or seen, especially when it is unpleasant. This one was funny to me, so I wanted another one, and I found, at last, existence that is absolute, self-sufficient, or objective, and not subject to human decision or convention. Okay, with these 3 definitions, I was still not very satisfied, so I went to the literature, and this is how I discovered, Vladimir Nabokov. And so I want to thank Adam, because I saw that earlier in your talk, so you put reality in quotes. So Vladimir Nabokov said, reality is one of the few words that mean nothing without quotes. And I started to agree to this definition, so I wanted to investigate more in that direction. So what I've done next is that I've been to see who in the animal kingdom see differently from me. So that's the next slide that you've seen. I started with dogs. And maybe you knew that dogs only see yellow and blue. But did you know also that they have 300 million smell sensors in their nose when we only have 6 million? So that's a lot of difference. And if you take bears, they have 7 times even more than what dogs have. So I think that it gives a first notion of how their reality and my reality can be different. But I've been a little bit deeper in the animal kingdom, and I find eagles, and maybe you knew that they have 3.6 times a better vision, better acuity that we humans have. And talking about mice, because we have a mouse in this slide, so I discovered that mice, they were actually colorblind to the color red. But their eyes had an amazing capacity, is that they're not correlated. So the left eye can look up when the right eye can look down, and it still makes sense of reality, and I cannot do this. At the opposite of color blindness, we have the mantis shrimp. I don't know if you ever heard about mantis shrimp, but those creatures are super interesting because they see 16 colors, where we only see 3 principal colors. So they see 16 colors, and I'm like, okay, I cannot even start to imagine what a mantis shrimp really, what it sees when it looks at reality. But we have this list going on, and for example, the platypus, if you've ever seen a platypus, that's a platypus. So the platypus, they actually find their prey underwater by sensing the electricity their muscle produces. And of course, the list wouldn't be complete without cats. And I wanted to put this one because, okay, cats see better than us in the dark, that you probably knew this before, but that's the first answer I found Googling, can my cat see? And so I found, can my cat see me in heaven? So I thought that if a lot of you have those questions in head, maybe it was worth asking it. So, us too, we have superpowers. We see in categories. So it's super efficient because by labeling things, we can know directly what we are talking about very rapidly, and we don't have to use that much cognitive resources to know what part of reality we are talking about. A good example of that is, of course, colors. So we can come up with a lot of different words for colors, but usually when we talk to each other, we use very basic colors. And that's interesting because in a study actually in 2015, we've been asked to participants to remember colors. And for example, what's the color blue? We would ask them to remember the color navy blue, electric blue, etc. A lot of different blue on the spectrum, but they realized that at the end, memorizing the color they've seen, they will just label it the same. They will just label it blue color. So it seems that we are maybe pretty limited in our vision of reality, and labeling is a super tool, but also makes us a little bit blind on reality sometimes. We also have, we have other superpowers, and this one are about cognitive biases. Who heard about cognitive biases in this room? Yep. Cool. Okay, so cognitive biases are super interesting because they help us to make sense of reality very more easily, more rapidly. But it's also a trap because we tend to jump to conclusion quicker, right? So that's interesting because if you look up on the internet, you'll find the codex of cognitive biases, and you'll find out that we have named over 180 of them. So that's a lot of possibility that something could go wrong in our perception of reality. I'd like to go with 2 examples of cognitive biases, but first I would like to read you 3 sentences. I've been thinking about you, and I came up with the 3 definitions. I think you'll feel related to this, so we're gonna make this test together. At times, you have serious doubts as to whether you have made the right decision or done the right thing. Second one, you have a capacity that you have not turned to your advantage yet. And third one, you have a tendency to be critical of yourself. So who is in this room have felt they were connected to the 3 of those descriptions? Okay, interesting. From an American scientist, what they found out is that's actually an extract from the study. It was 10 questions asked to the participants, and they were quite vague, but 85% of the participants said it was true and directed to them. It's called the Barnum effect. And so the Barnum effect is giving you sentences that are quite vague, but still seems intimate to you. And so you will, for example, So that's what is used by horoscopes and some psychics to make you feel that they know you, because they're using general words, but you'll feel connected to this. Another one, it's, we're gonna have availability heuristic, and a good example is the 9/11. So availability heuristic is considering a threat, but making it bigger, and because of that, being endangered more. So what happened on 9/11, you all remember, the plane. What happened in the American society is that people started to be afraid of taking the plane. So what they did is that they took the car more. But this year, we had an increasingly, very dramatic increase of car crash, because people were taking the car more. So they were overestimating the danger of taking the plane, so they took the car and they died more because of that. So that is called variability heuristic. So after this investigation, what I started to understand is that I was very limited in my way of understanding reality. So I started to ask myself this question: what about free will? What about my free will? Here, anyone thinks they have free will, free choice, pure free choice? Interesting. Interesting. Okay, we'll discuss about this then. I'm not here to argue that we have the absence of free will and free choice, as some philosophers and scientists argued, but I will say rather that it's stuck between three fields: education and culture, biology and environment. So I'll give you a few examples. Education and culture. It's quite easy to see how we can actually be limited in our free choice and free will by education and culture. For example, what is the meat I will eat or not eat? Is it dog? Is it cow? Is it horse? Depending on the culture you come from, it's going to be a different answer. Let's jump to environment and affordances. Maybe you're familiar with the word affordance. Okay, so if you're from a design background, you've heard about this before. Affordances is the usage offered by design by an object or an environment. So for example, I'm giving you a mug, and a mug is giving you a few options to use it. Anyway, so that was a box, and you see all different things you can do with this box by design. That's affordances. But that works also with our cities. And that's a fun fact I would like to share with you, is that we discovered that our cities, big skyscrapers, are actually giving headaches to the humans. Why? Because we are used to see in nature not straight lines. Okay? But what happens, and that has been measured, what happens when you look at skyscrapers and you look at straight lines before you all the time? Actually, your brain is using more resources to understand what's happening in front of you. And so, you're using more oxygen. And oxygen consumption in the brain is also linked to headaches. So that's how they came to the conclusion that our cities is giving headaches to the people inhabiting it. So, what happens if I'm living in a city, I have a headache and I have a bad mood? My choices are going to be changed. But also we have embodied cognition, and that's the biology part. Embodied cognition, so the basic definition is that the states of the body will determine or will hack the states of the mind. Let me give you a few examples of that. Organ stealing. That's a study that has been done with judges before they ate and after they ate, and they wanted to see if you are a judge, you're going to be nicer toward a case if you are on empty gut or if you just ate. And the numbers were very dramatic in this case, because right before going to eat, it was a 0% chance that the judge had a positive ruling toward the person coming to be judged. But if it was right after eating, they had a 65% chance to be judged positively. So we see that if we're on empty stomach or not, it's going to make a huge difference. And by the way, I'm really sorry because I know you're going to eat after this talk, so I hope it's going to be great. There's another one, it's one of my preferred. It's actually a study that showed that leaning a little bit on the left will make seem the Eiffel Tower smaller. So in this study, and it works with every participant, you would stand on a V balance, and you would be leaned a little bit on the left, or not leaned, or leaned a little bit on the right, but you would not perceive it. It's something that would not be perceived by the participant. And at the end, we will ask them to measure different type of objects, buildings, etc. And in every case, they would give answers that are smaller than if they were just standing up or leaning to the right. So leaning to the left could lead to a decrease the importance of numbers. One of the explanation of that is that the thing that in our culture we tend to rank small numbers to the left. So if we're leaning to the left, we're going to access the small numbers first. That was the explanation of this study. But I would like you to experience firsthand one illusion that you induce through your body. So what you're going to do is you're going to cross your finger and use both of the fingertips, put it on your nose. Both of the fingertips must be on the nose. You're going to close your eyes and rub gently your nose. Close your eyes. And so what you should start to feel is that you start to have double nose. Is that your nose is starting to duplicate itself. So what's happening here is that your senses are blind, right? I don't see what's happening, I just feel my two fingers tell me there's nose under it. But when it's moving, it doesn't know where it is anymore, so it thinks that it starts to be two noses at the same time. Okay, I could induce also the illusion that you have a 1 meter long nose. That works as well, but we will not have the time today to do it. But also, I can induce the illusion that you have 3 arms with a rubber hand illusion. So what they do is that they will just caress a fake arm and a real arm exactly at the same time. And that's interesting because it works in a matter of 2 minutes. You will start to think that the fake arm is actually yours. And even more interesting is that if we remove the fake arm and we start caressing the table instead, there's chances that you start to feel that the table is actually part of yourself. So that's interesting because I start to wonder if I can even think a table is part of me, what is me? And one of the answers I came up with is that I act, therefore I am, is the new I think, therefore I am. So we used to think my thoughts define myself. But now with meditation and the list goes on, we know that our thoughts maybe does not define ourselves. Maybe what defines ourselves more is our action, because I see myself doing something, so I think something of myself. And that's this trick that is used also with virtual reality for treating phobias, for example. Because you do exposition therapy, you force people into behavioring differently, into having a different behavior, and so they'll think, okay, I'm not into phobia anymore because I can stand right next to this big dog that I'm afraid of, or big spiders, or big hole in the ground, etc. So it's by acting that you hack yourself back. Talking about virtual reality and what avatars also can do for you, there's this very interesting thing that is called the Proteus effect. And the Proteus effect is that you will tend to behave closer to what you think your character should behave. So for example, let me give you an example. If I would give you an avatar that is you, but older, you would put more money for your retirement than if I would give you an avatar that is just your age. It's like connecting empathy with your future self. Another example, I really like this one. So in this trial, you had 43 participants, and it worked on the 43. They were given an avatar, and they were asked to look at themselves in the mirror. But also they would wear a vibrating device on their vocal cord. So every time that the avatar would talk, this device would vibrate, and at the end the participants will no longer know if it's themselves talking or the avatar. And the avatar was a young female, and she had a high pitch of tone. And at the end of the experience, all the participants, they tended to talk with a higher pitch of tone to sort of match the tone of the avatar. And it worked with every participant. Another example which I call the chocolat chaud à la Voldemort. In this experience, we would ask two participants to play either Voldemort, the supervillain, or Superman, super good. So they wanted to see if we can change your behavior very rapidly using your avatar. So creating pro-social behavior, pro-social change, or anti-social behaviors. So you would fight against each other, and at the end you would have to realize a hot chocolate, putting chocolate and chili pepper inside. But you have to choose how much you put of each ingredients, right? But it's funny because the next participant would have to drink this drink, alright? So you're fighting, and at the end you make this hot chocolate. And what they saw is Superman's, they would pour more chocolate into the hot beverage and less chili pepper. And at the opposite, Voldemort's, they would put more chili pepper and less chocolate in the hot beverage for the next participant. So you can see that you can create behaviors very rapidly with games and with avatar. So my third question was, what is virtual? After what is me? What is virtual if playing with an avatar, playing a game, can change me in the real world? So I get to see that virtual actually does not exist. Everything is real, everything is experience. If I see myself acting and I change my behavior after that, it's real, it's from the real world, it's really happening. A trial has been made also on horror movies and to see the impact of 2D versus 3D. So the more immersion you have, and the more emotion you should have also. So they wanted to try this, and so what they saw is Brenda Bruni led this experience. What they saw is if we measure the conductivity of your skin and your heart rate, means your emotivity, right? And you're watching a horror movie on a 2D screen, you're gonna be emotive at some point, for sure, but you're gonna calm yourself down. It means that your heart rate is gonna go down for a bit. But if you're watching a 3D horror movie, it's gonna be more difficult. We see that the conductance of the skin stays high and the heart rate also stays high. But what about virtual reality? Because in virtual reality, and you mentioned it before, in virtual reality, you are in the middle of the content. You are in the middle of the content. You have more emotions. And I created a little best of the internet of people being very emotive with virtual reality. Oh, sorry. It's not supposed to move actually. Is someone like...
Okay, he's behind you, he's behind you. He's behind you.
Oh, it's good. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's not real. You hear this at the end, but they are not actors, right? They're really frightened by the VR contents. That's the thing because, like, you mentioned it earlier, but we think a lot about what we're putting in our bodies, what we eat in the morning, in the afternoons, in the evenings. We think about our physical health a lot, and that notion also evolved a lot with time. What I will propose you is that next we think about a cultural diet. We think about what we're putting in our minds. We'll think about cultural contents as nutrients, as something that will have an impact on our psyche, that will have an impact on our reality. Because if virtual world does not exist, there's only reality. There's only what you're experiencing, right? So that's an open question, but what can we put in this pyramid of cultural content? And I would like to end on saying that my vision of virtual reality is also that if we tend to think it's only a technology to have fun, see different things, etc., I think it has actually a really profound power. And this power is to invite the context back. To invite the context back in your life and to have access to information that 2D and Zoom in do not give you on a daily basis. And that's an extract, by the way, from Welcome to Life Fields. It's a free VR application, so I really invite you to try this one. It's just completely amazing. And I'd like to finish on a quote from Yuval Noah Harari, so the author of Sapiens, that you maybe know. So what he said in an interview earlier this month and really inspired me, it was with Tristan Harris, an interview to Wired. He said, I'm going to quote this, I think that we are now facing really not just a technological crisis, but a philosophical crisis. Because we have built our society, certainly liberal society, with the election and the free market and so forth, on philosophical ideas from the 80th century, which are simply incompatible with not just the scientific findings of the 21st century, but above all, with the technology we now have at our disposal. Our society is built on the ideas that the voter knows best, that the customer is always right, that ultimate authority is with the feelings of human beings, and this assumes that human feelings and human choices are this sacred arena which cannot be hacked. But that was never true. We didn't pay, though, a very high cost for believing in this myth in the 19th and the 20th century, because nobody had the technology to actually do it. But now some people, corporations, governments, are gaining the technology to hack human beings. Maybe the most important fact about living in the 21st century is that we are now hackable animals. So, to end with this is virtual reality really taught me something. It taught me something about my reality and how I had to step back about what I used to think was reality. So I really hope that this small talk will have opened some doors for you on your own reality to understand it better and maybe to create yours in better ways. Thank you very much.